Hello there, and welcome to this arty corner of YouTube, which is my home here. I love to create art, I love to share it with people, I love to inspire and encourage you, and it brings me a lot of pleasure to do so. I've just realised I haven't finished this bit off, as I'm looking at it now. There we are, we'll work round it or whatever. So it's lovely to have you with me, to spend some time here as I create, and perhaps you'll be drawing along with me or you'll gain some inspiration from this to create your own version. Either will work, or perhaps you just want to listen to me wittering or watch what I'm doing, and that's fine. Just a huge thank you for coming back and for sharing time with me. And if you're new here, thank you so much. And if you enjoy what you see, a little subscribe would go a long way. I've got ton of back videos, a catalogue of videos, library of videos on YouTube, going back, I think it's about 3 years. But I'm absolutely gobsmacked that I now have over 2,500 subscribers. And I still can't believe that. So thank you, each and every one. So, right, where are we going with this lot? Okie dokes. So, the last 2 videos, I think it was. Did I get to part 3? I don't know, I'm going to have to check. But I've drawn, completed this drawing, except for these bits here, which I haven't finished going around with the black. But I'm going to leave as it is for now. Now's the time for me to add some colour. And I've chosen, I'm going to work with alcohol markers because this is marker paper specifically for alcohol markers. And I've had a lot of pleasure in the last couple of weeks using my Chameleon markers. So I've chosen 3 colours. This one is a BG4, which is aquamarine, and it's a lovely tealy colour. I've got sage green, which is, as it says, a sagey green. And you might notice with the names on these, the Chameleon, see the colours fade from colourless to full intensity of colour? That's because they're rather special in their own way. Did I say I'd chosen 3 colours? I haven't chosen 4. This one here is yellow-green, YG3. Well, the sage was GR2, so I've got a yellow-green. So I'm going from a blue-green to a green to a yellow-green. And then I'm going to a yellow, which is lemon. No, it's not yet lemon yellow. What do they call it? Summer sun. And that's YL2, which is lemon yellow, I'm guessing. And the other bits you can see here, these are what's called colour tops, and they just have the pure colour in them. And I'm going to show you how these work, hopefully. I won't show you everything, but I'll explain to you how it works. So I've got a piece of paper here. I think it's Bristol paper. This top chamber has just got colourless ink in it, or colourless blending fluid, nothing else. The main part, if I take that off, there's a hole there, and there's a reason for that. And I'll show you. No tip comes down, so you can't draw with that. But the pens here have got 2 ends. We've got a bullet tip, which I tend to use an awful lot because my work tends to be quite intricate and detailed. So it's quite nice to use that. On the other end, there's a brush tip, and this is an unusual brush tip because the fibres will flare out more like a brush than, say, Copics or other alcohol markers. So I'm not so sure I like this brush tip, but I will use it on larger areas if I have to. So how do these work? Let me start with, I've got the bullet tip, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the mixing chamber on the top. I'm going to press that down because then the 2 tips meet, and I hold it upright, and you learn to judge how long. I'm not counting here, so I don't know how long it's been. But what you do is you're putting colourless ink, colourless blender, into the tip of the coloured pen, which pushes the colour back, but it'll create a gradient. So if I go to my paper and I just start, I'm going to try and hold my pen quite high up. No, I can't do it. It has to go this way. I think this needs refilling actually because the ink is coming out. I haven't got a very smooth gradient in terms of the colour. Let me just zoom in terms of the colour here. But let me try with the other end. Let me have a look and see if I'm back. That's full intensity of colour. We automatically get a fading of colour. And I'll use the other tip, the brush tip. And let's see how this works now. Very pale. And I'm going backwards and forwards here. And you can see that's the actual full colour. The other end, the bullet end, has actually got colour from, still got colour from another colour in it. So I'm just going to work that out until I get that lovely blue colour that's there. Gosh, am I going to ever get there? Have I contaminated this end? It's not far off, is it? We're getting there. Yeah, so, and they all work the same, but the fun thing is we can also use colour tops. So I've got this aquamarine, and I'm going to add some lemon yellow to it. And I'm just going to, oh, I didn't add enough. That's typical. Actually, it's a fair amount there, but I want enough of the yellow to show as well. So let's have a look. Oh. And it gradually changed from one colour to another. As you can see here, and I'm still not back to that lovely aquamarine. It's not far off. So I may have already contaminated it, which is nothing much I can do about it. So I'm going to use this idea to actually colour in parts of this. The lovely thing is I can get the darker areas to give me shadow without using grey or anything else underneath. I could have done this in grey, but I am zoomed in, so I'm going to make a start on this, and I'm going to start with, I think I'm going to start with the sage green. Oh, and you can stack multiple colours as well. So I could have gone after the yellow and added, or added a yellow green, then the yellow on top to say this one, and I'll go from yellow to say yellow green to sage green. So you can actually build up gradients. You can put a number of colours in there. That does my head in a little bit. In some ways this does my head in, but I worked out that it doesn't take me much longer to do this than if I'd was using 2 or 3 pens that I have to pick up and put down as I'm adding colour. I'm going to start with this section here, and I've decided what I want to do is I want to put a highlight towards the middle. And when you're working with alcohol markers, if you want a white highlight, you can just leave them the colour of the paper. Now on marker paper I will get a longer fade out than I would on the Bristol paper, because the Bristol paper is more absorbent and this isn't quite as absorbent. Now I'm going to turn my paper around. So I've added some more of the colourless blender, and then I'm just going to work back and forth quite slowly so the ink has a chance to flow out, or to saturate the paper, I suppose. And that's working sort of. This is the one frustration I have with this, is that we do get paler colours on this than I would do on something like Bristol paper or the Ohuhu marker paper, because this paper isn't as absorbent. But then I also quite like that, because I quite like the more muted colours. Excuse me for twisting and turning this, but I find it the best way for me to work with these. And there will be lines and streaks in the colour, and that doesn't bother me one little bit. In fact, I quite like the effect. And I guess it is personal preference. I know that markers are meant to give you very clean, very consistent colouring, very flat, though you can get texture in them. But I quite like having these lines in some ways, because this will make these feel a bit like they're metallic. I'm not going to colour all of this in today. this may be a project over the coming days, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. Okay, so I added way too much colourless blender to this because I was talking, so I'm going to have to come back to this one. I'm also trying not to overlap into the pen lines because they the ink will pick up some of the pigment, or the alcohol marker will pick up some of the pigment and will give it a mucky look. But again, if that happens, I'm just going to go with it, go with the flow, because it is what it is. And even though I've left these sections open, I am likely to want to come back after I finish colouring and add some texture, and I may actually do some of that today with you, because I prefer to add the textural pans on top of the alcohol marker for the reason I've just mentioned, that the alcohol markers can shift. We are going in there with just darkness. And what I can do as well is, while I've got pretty much a full colour here, is I'm going to go around just on the right on the edges where there would be some extra shadow and just add a little bit of darkness there. Remembering that alcohol markers do dry lighter than they were. Well, it's Saturday here, Saturday before Christmas. It's Christmas Eve tomorrow, I think. And it's grey and drizzly and damp outside in the valleys of South Wales here. And we've had quite a few days this week where it's been like that. I've had to run errands this week. I've actually managed to get out and do my shopping in relative peace and quiet, which is good for me because I don't do well in crowds and loud, noisy places. And even with my loops in, it can bother me, the noise. It doesn't completely cut them out, it just dulls everything down. But here I am. And so it's been a funny week for lots of reasons. In fact, the whole year's been a peculiar year for me in some ways. I never thought I'd find myself having another burnout shutdown mentally and emotionally as I did back in February, I think it was. It started before that, I think. It started building up before I damaged my shoulder back last November. And that really did cause me some concern, to be honest. And do you like that colour? And it's just been one thing after another. I am gradually getting some energy back, though it's not consistent. It's like one day this week, not yesterday, not last night, the night before, I actually slept for 12 hours or more in the day, overnight and so on. And I woke up for a short while in the morning and I just fell asleep. And I didn't get up till 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Just slept right through, more or less, with an hour or so just awake. I'm not able to move. It sort of troubles me and it sort of doesn't, if that makes any sense, because I must have needed it, and I know that I can not always have a good quality sleep, or perhaps I just don't get enough sleep anymore. So I'm going to do the thin bands here with yellow. But I'm gradually getting more focus and an ability to do things. It's not perfect. Some days I'm absolutely useless, to be honest. I should have brought an orange up perhaps to go with this, but I can always add colour on the top again afterwards as well. This is the beauty about alcohol markers. I know you can do that with most mediums, but I find alcohol markers particularly useful for this. There we are. And that is a real lemony yellow. It's a real acid yellow. And I'm going to put some on this part here. And I'm going back and forth in these little areas and just trying to blend in the gradients as I go, because it's really hard to go side to side. So as long as I make sure that I get that gradient going. That is violently yellow, and I think I will keep that for particular edges and borders. And as I say, I may bring some orangey colour or pale peachy colour, something like that, just to add a better kind of gradient in there, and to tone down this acidy yellow. It really is acid as anything. There we are. That was good planning, but you know, it will go with the greens, because I've chosen a blue green, a green green, a yellow green, and this yellow, this cool yellow, which is closer to green than the warmer yellows, which are closer to red or orange. So that'll work. It'll work out fine. As I say, I can always tone it back. All right, so use that one. Let me use the lemon. I'm going to do something a bit different, because I want to use, I was going to use this one, but its ink isn't very good, is it? But let's have a look. Let me use that with the yellow green to fill in some of these sections over here. So let's see how well this does. That's definitely a yellowy green there. And it's definitely fading back to the back towards the tealy colour, but it's still a bit green. So back to the yellow in the middle, yellow green, back like that. So the darker colours start to bring that contrast in. In some ways, I might come back with a grey on top to dull this down and push it back a little bit further to dull the colours down. I like the sage as it is though. So I'm just going to try and keep the yellow green in about the same position. Just get this all fading out nicely. So it's been a funny old week in some ways. In other ways it's been a lovely week. Yesterday was winter solstice, and I did do a drawing yesterday just for the solstice. I managed to keep, so yesterday or the day before, well, it's actually over a couple of days, same as the colouring page for the Facebook group, which is the cute whimsical doodle worlds kind of one. And I enjoyed doing these, but actually this one was probably, I could get away without this green. Let's see if we can get this back towards the more tealy colour as well. Perhaps just a little bit of yellow green here. So I enjoyed doing those. I enjoyed the hand lettering on the winter solstice one. I haven't done much hand lettering for a while now. This kind of art at the moment seems to be my go-to when I'm able to do that. I've done a fair amount of knitting. Yes, knitting. I've rediscovered my love of knitting. Crochet has gone by the by. I was a manic knitter for many, many years. I really was. And what's his name? Kay Fassett was a big influence. I learned how to knit when I was, I don't know, it would have been 4 or 5, maybe 6. My grandmother taught me how to knit, and she did show me the basic of crochet as well. And I'd be forever playing with a ball of, I had one ball of yarn, and I used to knit with it and then take it apart and knit with it again, because I didn't have any other yarn. And so it's constantly practicing with this. And as I got older, eventually I wanted to knit, and I learned, basically taught myself how to read knitting patterns and how to use them to make garments and so on. And then when I was in my, I was doing my PhD, so I'd have been 21 to 24. I discovered K Facet. Oh, and wherever I went, I had this huge bag of yarn with me and knitting because of the way that he does the intarsia knitting in his first books, his Glorious Knitting. Oh, I fell in love with it. And I've actually bought a book of his patterns a couple of weeks ago, of actually the knitted, not the patterns for garments, but the patterns he uses in knitting. And they're just so inspirational for work like this as well. I'm just thinking, yeah, I can see there's another influence on me has been K Facet. So there's good fun. Right, so I'm looking at where else I want this kind of colour, and I think I'm going to go in the middle here. But I'm going to use quite a bit of this yellow-green in the middle. I'm tempted to put just a hint of yellow in there as well. Yeah, let's go with some yellow. Put the lid back on that one. Honestly, these do seem a bit of a potch, but if I can cope with them as they are, no, it didn't quite work, but we have got some yellow there. There we are. So we've got some, oh, I picked up some black there. Not a problem, because that will end up being disguised as I will add some more pattern to this. As I say, it seems a bit of a potch, but I'm only doing that for a short amount of time as I'm filling a section in. And then normally I'd be swapping pens out back and forth, and I'd be layering more than once to get smooth, you know, smooth layers and intensifying colours where I want them. Whereas with this, I can just work as I go, just like this. So it might appear to be a bit on the potchy side, but the reality is I prefer to do this than to have a handful of pens or pens that I'm picking up, putting down, managing to drop and get stuff everywhere. Kid you not. Nightmare. I really am a bit of a mare. Add some yellow. Try for a little bit more yellow. There we go. Oops. A bit more of that yellow there. Now, I'm not going to try and use graphite on this paper because it's got a very smooth surface with very little tooth. And I'm not quite sure how graphite would work on it, but my feeling is not very well. And if you know me, you know I'm not a fan of using graphite for shading. It works, don't get me wrong, but I much prefer to use colour. There we go. Not perfect, not perfectly smooth, but I'm quite happy with it as it is. I am. So yellow-green again for this section. And I will pop some yellow, move that out of the way before they're all rolling everywhere now. Use me, they're saying. Not really. My pens don't speak to me literally. I've forgotten what I was wittering about before all of this. Oh yeah, winter solstice. I was mentioning, and it was winter solstice. Well, the exact point of solstice was about 3:30, something like that, on very early Friday morning, and here in the UK anyway. And but the days now are about, you know, they don't vary much in length, the days and nights. So we're in the solstice season. So, but it won't be long before we'll be seeing a slight difference in the length of days. The days will get longer, the nights shorter, very slowly at first. But then it will speed up towards the equinox before slowing it down before we go to the summer solstice here. So I know that in the southern hemisphere you're celebrating, you know, it's the summer solstice for you, because, oh, I didn't put yellow on. It's okay, we'll work with it as it is. No, we won't. Put yellow on. Fade that out. Silly woman. It'll be fine. I'll put the yellow up here, and then hopefully I can just come over and... Yeah, that was a mistake. But again, as I said, I will end up drawing over these to add patterns. So it's a bit of an abrupt one there. Right, I'm not going to use... I want to try and get this back to its original colour, so I'm just going to get rid of all the ink that has run down into the nib. I need to remember to do this. There we are. Every time I use these nibs, to be honest. Right, where's the top there? It's getting all complicated. Not really. Okay, and I am going to use the lemon green. Actually, let me go back and use some sagey green in places, because I like the sagey green. Let me have a look. I want to get rid of the colours here. That's really interesting because they're... Yeah, I've got a yellow green. I'm wondering, why is that so yellowy in colour? Because for some reason I managed to put the yellow green on top instead of the sage green. Oh no, it's yellow green. I wanted the sage green. Duh. That looks like it needs more ink put in it. The sage green is much greyer green, and I like it a lot. So, go on to the face. So I'm looking here for where I think there would be a highlight, and I think there might be a highlight just here. I was one of the first people to have the Chameleon pens, because I actually bought them on the Kickstarter that started them off, because I've been using alcohol markers, and I really am so frustrated with so much to do with them, and I've just seen a delivery van out the corner of my eye, so I'm just going to finish this little bit off and go down, and I'll be back, maybe with some other markers as well, just to complete this. So I'll see you in a moment. And I'm back, a bit breathless because I've been up and down the stairs a couple of times. I've just got upstairs and the door knock went again, and it was the Amazon chap asking if I could take a parcel in for one of my neighbours. Not a problem, said I. Right, yes. So I've brought a couple of other pens up with me. I've got a yellowy orange colour that's called Warm Sunset to go on these, because I do think the lemon yellow needs some calming down. Yeah. And I've got a cool grey Chameleon. Now for these ones I haven't brought any colour tops with me for them, because I'm just going to use them with the colourless blender and the pure colour. So if I go here, I'm going to start somewhere, not right in the middle, but somewhere here. And then as the colourless blender runs out, this will get more and more orange. Or orangey yellow, and it'll just make that a little less acid. You can see the difference it makes. And I'll just do the same down the other side. So again, not quite from the exact centre, just a little bit off. I've picked up some of the ink again from pen drawing, but that actually makes a nice difference. It does. So I'll just quickly go over the other sections I've done with this. Like so. And this one as well. Again, with this one I'm just going to move it back and forth as I go along so that I try not to pick up too much of the ink, or at least if I do, it sort of stays roughly along the ink length. That actually makes quite a nice difference, I think. And I'll do this one as well. Like so. This one here. Now it's not fading easily towards the orangey colour, so I'm just removing some of the ink off on the scratch piece of paper I'm testing markers on and so on, just to make sure I get that darker colour coming. I think I mentioned that I sent off my DNA to be analysed, and part of the family tree I've started doing, which I'm very tempted to start again because I think I've got multiple entries for the same person. I'm trying to work out which is the best and not. I'm sort of almost want to go, right, that's it, I'm going to start again. Or perhaps not delete this one, but start another one and use this one as a reference and see where I go. But the DNA results are really interesting in many ways. And I can compare them with my older sister, who's my half-sister. And I can find out then which parent is my mother, because we've got different fathers. And which you get parent 1, parent 2, which you've got from each parent. And so I can compare that. And it's really quite interesting because we've got some similarities, but mainly we're quite different. A lot of my DNA seems to have come from around the Yorkshire area, and which I expected because that's where my father's from, and it is my father's side of the family. But I also have a fair wodge of Nordic DNA from Iceland, Norway, Sweden, that sort of area. And of course, Yorkshire was one of the main centres. York, the city of York, was one of the main centres of Viking settlement in the UK. So that doesn't surprise me at all. I also have a fair percentage of Welsh, but I was expecting that, not because I live in Wales, because I was born in England, but there were ancestors going back 2 or 3 or 4 generations who had come from Wales into my father's family tree, my father's side of the family tree. Was it my father's or my grandmother's? Whichever way. So I went, oh, that's nice to know. And there's a smattering from Western Europe because, you know, England is a right hodgepodge of, or Britain, it's a right hodgepodge of nationalities and so on from all kinds of things. So it was really interesting. So, yes, so that I've already got matches for people who match my DNA in places, and I don't know whether I'm going to reach out to them because I'm really not good at reaching out to people and saying, hi, I could be your long lost something or other, because they may not want to know, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but they'll know. Anyway, right, let me go back to the grey, because I said I'd like to tone these down a bit, perhaps these with some grey. So I've picked a cool grey, which is CG8, so it's quite a dark, intense grey. But I'm going to use the brush end and the clear end. And let's see what difference that makes to this here. Let me have a look. I don't want too much of the colourless blender, that'll do. So I am just painting with this grey over the top of the green, and I chose cool grey because these are cool greens. And I think you'll see that's made quite a difference to that colour. And I'm going to do the same up here where it's quite garish. I said I was going to do that. Now I could put this on to begin with and then add the colours over the top, so I may very well continue to do that. Now I've got the grey pen here. And if I leave this one untouched, you can see the difference between them, I hope. Yeah, that one is darker, not quite so in your face garish, but you've still got the brightness of colour at the same time. Now I can see here where the lighter area is, so I'm just going to work just a little distance away from the exact centre. I don't have to go back over the middle bit. I've got that there. And this is something you can do with any sort of like transparent medium. I could have used a complementary colour to add the shading, but I'm going to stick simply with greys. Complementary colours are colours opposites on the colour wheel. So for green, that would be reds, reddy purples, orangey reds, depending on whether you want a warm undertone or a neutral one, which would be a pure red. Neutral. Did I say neutral? Not neuter. And just see, now that is so much nicer. I like the more muted tones, actually. I really do. So guess what? I'll do the same over here. Getting a masterclass in how to use, or how I use, well, in this case, Chameleon pens, but the principles work the same for any alcohol marker. Adding one colour over another is a technique called glazing, and it's used in watercolour. You can use it with coloured pencils. You know, layering colours one on top of the other is common in gouache, and gouache you have to because it's opaque, acrylic paints and so on. Though some acrylics are translucent, or, you know, you can see what's beneath. Or you can use something to sort of thin them out. I'm trying to think of the right word. Oh, and again, you can see the lovely difference that's made in the way that it is just muted down all of these colours here. And in fact, I'm going to start here with my colourless solution, and I'm going to go over this yellow just a little bit. And grey and yellow does make a sort of greeny colour, so that will automatically mute down that bright yellow. It is very garish. So, and my DNA results were available on winter solstice, which made me smile. I prefer winter solstice to all the other holidays. I'm not very good at Christmas because I've got so many triggers at Christmas and so on that I try to keep away from it. And I don't have any of that with the winter solstice. I celebrate it in my own kind of way, I suppose. But it gives me a chance to look back on the year and to think about things and what I need to try to let go of, what I'm finished with. You know, sort of like the progress I've made, progress I'd like to continue to make. It's not really resolutions, it's just trying to focus on things. And this year it was quite simple. I just need more energy, more focus. And really I'm waiting for something. So I'm waiting for a couple of things to occur this year as well that I've been waiting for nearly a year now. So hopefully they'll be sooner rather than later. And I may choose to share, I may not. So you're all going to be intrigued with what I'm talking about now. There you are. The difference that made, just that bit of grey, how it's just muted it all down. I'm not going to do it with the sage green because I think the sage green is quite dark on its own, but I am going to do it with these yellowy orangey parts because I think they could just do with that little bit of muting again in places. Okay, so let's have a look. Round here, I'll want that highlight around here, and again I've got way too much blending solution here for me. I tend to go by instinct. I think it's because I've used them on and off for quite a few years now. But, you know, after I've spent a lot of money on other markers, coming back to these, remembering I had them was a bit of a sort of like, oh, I haven't used those, I wonder. Did use them last year, about a year ago, and I thought I really like these. But I think they don't have the colours, or necessarily the colours I'd like. But then if I'm working monochrome, that's not such a big deal. So I am going to add grey, or greys in here. Just to get this, some highlights and shadows going on. Now the shadows may not be as dark as you might like. In fact, they may not be as dark as I might like. But I always think, well, Angela, you're going to be adding colour over the top, and that will darken these up. I'm intrigued to see how the sage green would actually go over the top of these, to be honest, as well. So I've got that there. Let's have a look here. Where would I like this? So with this, I want a more circular kind of shadow, I think. So I'm going like that. I'm going to take the darkness around the edges to where I mostly want it dark. And I know that I can go back with grey. It's just like all other alcohol markers, the colours will layer up and intensify each other, and I'll wait for it to dry before I do that. And I can control where the darker areas are as well. So that's looking pretty spiffing. One of the things in my Amazon delivery just now, I've got some flavoured sugar-free syrups that can go in coffee. Yes, I do drink coffee. I prefer tea mostly, but at the moment I'm on a coffee kick. And because they're sugar-free, I can enjoy them quite freely. And they're salted caramel in flavour. And I haven't really been enjoying tea. I made tea yesterday, but I let it brew for about a minute longer than I'd enjoy. The usual 30 seconds show the tea bag to the hot water and take it out. But so is that. Another fountain pen for my collection. Yes, I know. Me and fountain pens, what can I say? Let's take that up there. Like so. I do want to get some shading in here, so I'm just going to go around this with the pen, not moving the... I'm just going to add just a little bit more around here. I really want to keep it mostly colourless. I do want just bits of shading there. And I'm going to do the same around this area just to get that little bit of shading, just to bring that alive. So I had that fountain pen, which I meant to bring upstairs, and I will go downstairs and get it upstairs while the video's processing and so on, so I can put my put some ink in it and use it for drawing. So I've got loads of fountain pens. I just like to move things out. Now then, this is where things are getting awkward here, because I've got smaller spaces with this nib that just soaks the colourless blender up. So I'm going to leave it like that for a moment, and I'll come back with my like this. And I can put shadow where I really want it, and I'm going to do the same around here, so I can intensify those shadows where I want overlaps or cast shadows, like so, just to bring them to a little bit more life, I suppose. And even though it looks quite dark when you add it here, will actually dry that little bit lighter. Just like so. And then I've got that kind of feeling of dimension going on. In fact, I think I may pop the lid on and I'm going to use the bullet tip for the toothy pegs, because I do want to get some shading on either side, but I only want a very narrow band, and I don't really want to use the there we go, so we've got some teeth going on there. That'll be lovely. Okay, let's have a look at some of the other areas that are quite small. So these are going to be interesting because I'm going to leave the tips lighter, I think, and just concentrate on getting darker colour towards the bottom edge. Working with the greys first is a really good way of making sure you've got the shading where you want it. It's something that I do when I remember when I'm using digital art, is that I can turn the colour off and just show the contrast values, the grey values, and or the grayscale version, and you can check there's enough contrast. If you're looking for something, if that's what's particularly important. I tend to have a very simple view on all of this, though, I think. Just a bit too much of the colourless blender on that one. Possibly here as well. So let me just do two at a time, trying not to overlap over the yeah, that works better. And it's they're smaller spaces, but I won't try to do it with the brush nib. The bullet nib gives me much better control over this. And here really I don't want much in the way of anything light, because it's all going to be quite shadowed there. Again, that's just brought that out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add some shadows where there's going to be overlap shadows, more than trying to get that main kind of shadowing going on. And I think I'll do that with all of these, putting shadow in where I think there would be shadow. The pen line here suggests shadow, the thicker the line on the left, so that's where I'm putting these. Just being consistent with it, that's all that you need to do. And the same here, where I'm just going to put grey in like that. So that works quite nicely. In fact, when you just put these plain lines in, it really does darken up the darkest area and gives you that real value of contrast. That really does help to bring the layers out. Okie dokes. We're doing okay, aren't we? I think so. Okay, just do another one or two, and then I'll start adding some colour. I want to leave these to dry really before I add colour, because otherwise the colour doesn't go on as intensely. It's sort of like the wetness of the paper doesn't allow much more ink to go on. So even if I did this in black and white, or just using grey for shading, it would actually just work regardless, I think. I don't know what you think, but I think it would. or just a single other colour. Part of me was thinking about browns. There are some lovely browns and browny reds in the Chameleon set. And if anybody who knows me, you know I have a bit of a thing about burnt sienna, or the reddy brown, burnt looking, rusty colours, and indigo blues together. There's just something that just makes me smile when I see those colours together. Rusty oranges, burnt orange, and so on. But I don't do much with them in that kind of way from Chameleons. Right, so I'm coming to the end of my time almost, so I will remind you, and I will put a note in the description box, that I am going to have a Zoom room open on Christmas Day, maybe Boxing Day, so on Monday, and which is Christmas Day, perhaps Tuesday. So if anybody is in need of a bit of company, a bit of a change of pace, wants to come and drop in just for a quick chat, or wants to come and draw with me, or, ask me questions, meet me, and me meet you, then I would like that. Don't feel any obligation that you have to. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get the Zoom room number to you all, though. That's the big problem. I don't want to put it out in the public place. So, yeah, so I'm not sure about that, because I don't want people who aren't connected to me in some way, either through this channel or through the colouring book group on Facebook. So I know I'll put the link in there for them. I'll probably set the room up later today and put the link in there for Monday. Because I live alone. I'm happy to be alone. I'm better by myself at Christmas than I am with other people, if that makes sense. So I tend to want to be like a hermit and hide myself away this time of year, because I know that there are too many triggers for me to deal with, but I'm better this year than I was last year or the year before or the year before. And I think it's because mainly because I'm now on antidepressants, which numb me to a lot of things, but it doesn't stop everything. I've had a few very sad and teary moments this week where things have got to me, but they don't. The thing is, with the antidepressants, they don't linger. It's really hard. It would be really hard for me to get myself into spiraling downwards and downwards as I used to, because my mind just flits off elsewhere, and it soon comes to a stop, which is a good thing. But those aren't as dark as I would have wanted, because I've put too much colourless blender in the pen. But what I can do is just come back now with just a bit more of the fully saturated ink, as saturated as the colour is, and just bring some extra shade in where I'd like it, just to add that feeling of, and it's that feeling of dimension, of layers, like so. There we go. Right then, so let me just do some with some colour on. I did want to try sage green with one, so I'm going to try sage green on here. Now, if the sage green doesn't work to my satisfaction, that's not sage green. I'm forever picking up the spring green as if it's sage green. Is that sage? No. Where's the sage green then? Cool grey, cool grey. Oh, that's dark. It is dark sage. Yeah, got it. Picked the wrong one up. So let me just try this on there and see what it looks like. And then if I'm happy with the way that the sage looks, so with the grey, yes I am. So I can add some more grey to places, and if I have a little bit of sage grey there's not much of a highlighter. Do you know, I'm not going to worry too much about that, because I do like to use white pens for highlights as well, or for adding pattern, so that's always a possibility here as well. So think the most important thing for me is I really want to get that sagey colour in, which I'm doing. And yet they're going to be slightly different colours in each section, but I think that makes it more natural as well. So that works quite nicely. And I am going to use the sage green on the, without too much of this, on here, and just allow the grey to add the shadows, knowing that again I can put the highlights in with white gel pen or white ink, whatever. Tell you what I do need to do is to darken some shadows underneath that area. It really is a dance back and forth between one colour and another when you do this, and it's quite fascinating how it works. And this here is where I want to add some extra shading in with the grey, just to bring again some dimension and layering out. I may actually put some on the bottom as well, and plenty in that little corner. Otherwise this green will get lost against this one possibly, so do the same there. That green is quite insipid, isn't it? I'm not very happy with that. That's my problem with that, with sage green, I'm afraid. Now then, I wonder, this is where I'm going to try something and see what happens, is I'm going to fill these in with pure sage green, but then I'm going to use the grey to put the highlights in. Let's have a look and see how that works. It may work nicely, it may not. I don't know for sure. It may be that here I might need to go over with that, with a yellowy green perhaps. There. Okay, so while that's drying, let me try the yellowy green over the top of this, because again it's just experimenting and seeing what happens. Every time you do it you learn. Well, hopefully you do. I'm never quite sure whether I learn or not. Ah, now that works nicely, because the sage green isn't a very strong coloured green, but this really does just help to bring that colour out. But the green mutes the sage green mutes the yellow green as well as the grey. I think I'd get away without using the sage green, to be honest, but that looks quite cool. And then, oh gosh, no, I don't want to do that. Try putting that on first, Angela. Then let's go to the grey. Which end shall I use? Let's use this end. No, brush end? Yeah, I'll use the brush end and the top. And let's see if this works nicely on top here. I'm hoping it will. I think it will, especially if I try not to get too much of the colourless blender. This one I just did, didn't I? That'll work. That'll work particularly if I can get the edges really quite dark. The one problem with this marker paper I found is that when I add more and more, the more layers of colour I add, the sort of like, it's really weird when I try to draw on top of them, is that the pens pick up some of the colour. It's because it doesn't sink into the paper. It's not designed to sink into the paper. or if it is, you know, it's designed to work well with markers, but it's always that caveat, isn't it? But, you know, you need to have done the drawing first, really. And I tend to do a mixture of drawings and adding colour, and let's have a look. Go down there, just add that darkness in, and then here, that lightness. So I think I've messed this up there, but it is what it is now, and maybe it just needs that little bit of the yellow-green again, just to bring it to life, perhaps. Or just some pattern. Oops. I don't know for sure, but we'll work it out. And here I'm just going to put some shading on the outside edges. Now I'm going to carry that down into the main part, and again around where there is shading, or where there is overlapping rather, so that we have a distinct shaded edge here. Okay. So yeah, so I'm not happy with what I've done there, but it's not irredeemable because I can go back. I'm going to let it dry because it is quite damp and sticky there now. But you can see what I'm doing, hopefully, and I'm not going to do any more because I'm most probably well over an hour here. But the principles of using colour are the same, I suppose, whether you're using watercolour, pencils and so on. It's all about layering colours, and you usually work light to dark. I can tend to work dark to light, depending on my mood with watercolours. Not that I use them very often anymore. And this year has really been playing around with different media, I think, and the last couple of months, certainly, if not longer, have been me settling into saying, this is my style of art. This is what I want to do. This is what I enjoy doing. I like to work intuitively. I like to work without a plan, because when I plan things out, it all goes to pot. I struggle with colour, but I've discovered if I try to keep monochrome, or like I've done here, analogous, these are colours next to each other on a colour wheel, I end up with something that's better than if I just have the whole colour box to use. So limiting colours really does help me. Markers seem to be what I like because they are a lot smoother, and I can get nicer gradients with them. You know, the colours I've chosen here are what they are, and I'm not disappointed with them, but by the time I finish this, I'll be going, what on earth was I thinking? Possibly. But I'll carry on with this now, away from the camera, unless you want to see more. But I'll show you it when it's complete, which, fingers crossed, maybe in a couple of weeks or more, because I'm not, colouring isn't my favourite thing to do, and it does take me quite a while to do. I am tempted to do some areas perhaps in just greys. I may come back and use some of those rusty colours on the faces, which I think would be quite nice. It looked more like rock. That there is what I wanted to do, wasn't it, with yellow green? Look at me saying that. So that's it, I've done now. And I'm going back to adding colour. What do you expect, eh? Dithering Angela. Yes, I am going side to side across this colour spot until I get to the full intensity of the yellow-green, because then I can fill in the sections with it. And it saves me having to blend more. I'll put more colourless blender in. So it's first stroke, 1 or 2 either side, and keep going until the colour fades. That's nice. That actually works quite nicely, and I think if I use grey there, it will look really quite nice. Put some grey in this part. Oh, the green just here as well. Again, I'm just going to work around here until I get the full saturation version of the ink, the colour. As in saturation of the ink that's in the pen, maybe not the saturation of the colour. But actually, I actually quite like that, contrasting with that. And I didn't put any grey in that one, the grey shadow. But let's just do that just to complete this. Just the grey where they would overlap. It's nice. There we go. That adds that contrast there, doesn't it? And then this would need it as well. Here. Just that little bit of added contrast just makes all the difference, doesn't it? And even though I've done the grey and the contrast here, I'm going back just to intensify those. Because again, when you put another layer on, it adds another layer of the colour, so it darkens the colour. It adds to it. So we've got that going on. And perhaps here we'd like that. And here. Like so. And so I've now carved something that's quite sculptural, not out of stone, but by adding ink, I've created something that's quite dimensional. So I hope you've enjoyed this. As I say, I'll set the Zoom room up, and I'll put trying to think how I can make it available to you. So I don't really want to put it on a public forum, but that may be the only way I can do it today, you know. At least as a host, I've got the power to kick people out who don't belong there, shall we say. So until I see you again, please take care of yourselves. I'm wittering on, and thank you for joining me. Bye for now. Bye. Hoyo. Oh, no, not that. Bye.